Common Knowledge is brought to you by PureMTGO.com and InkedGaming.com. Use coupon code CCMTG10 at checkout for a 10% discount on all Inked Gaming supplies and accessories. You can support the show directly through Patreon at patreon.com/common knowledge.
This is the Common Knowledge Podcast. It's not about the cost, it's about the knowledge. Here are your hosts, Brandon Clark and Lobbert.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 68 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, and joined with me on the other end of the line, as always, is my trusty companion, my loyal advisor, Sean the Lobbert, Stokey Mick, Stokey Pants.
What's up, Brandon?
Oh, not a lot. Just, it's like work has slowed down because there's not a train in Ogden anymore.
There are plenty of trains in Ogden, but there's not big whatever his name is.
It was like the 150th anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad, and Ogden, Utah was booked up, and the restaurant was just insane.
Yeah, and on my end, it's been pretty insane for me. We did the coverage for Oasis Games, and that's probably going to be already up by the time we post this episode because I'm partially done editing that. I posted my own YouTube video of the mono white Monarch deck that I've been talking about so much and I love. That was a pretty sweet video, if I do say so myself. But I went through that video twice, so that ended up being like 9 hours of editing, and then I edited last week's episode. So like at 9 o'clock until midnight every night, I've just been like, okay, sit down, edit, or work on something. So that's been pretty rough in terms of scheduling.
Yeah, wow. That sounds like a lot, but I think it'll be exciting. I'm excited to watch this mono white video. So for those who don't know, Sean has his own YouTube page, just Lobbert, Lobbert. So go check it out. Sweet new video.
All right, so let's kind of get into this podcast. We are a Pauper podcast, and this week we're going to be talking about Black White Pestilence.
So that was our deck of the month over a month ago. It's just been, we skipped a week because of the Twitch broadcast we did between our schedules. We didn't have time to do anything, and like the night that we did that was like our free night.
Yeah.
So. So we had to skip last week's episode. Sorry about that, but we're back. We're finally going to do the deck of the month for Black White Pestilence, and then I think we need to decide what our new deck of the month is going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll save that for the end.
Yeah, and it's going to be a weird one. We'll get to that at the end. So before we get into it, I do want to talk about our last episode. I think that was probably our most negative episode that we've ever recorded when I went back through and listened to that. And even at the time, I said I didn't feel good about it. And it was like almost to the point where I was like, I don't feel good about posting this, but it's also like, that's how I really feel. So like, I don't want to misrepresent how I feel. So the podcast is partially to generate excitement about a thing that we all love together, and we want to be excited for you. But when something sucks, we're also just going to say that because we're not just rabid fanboys that just love everything Pauper does forever.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's important for us to express our, feelings of contempt.
Yeah.
For things, like if things aren't great, I don't think that it's fair to the listeners or us to try to pretend that everything's great. Like, the state of the format, in our opinion, right now is not good. It's not fun.
Right.
I
And
don't necessarily believe that us trying to sugarcoat it benefits anyone. I think that I don't know. That's my opinion. I would rather tell things the way they are. This is how I feel about it, and I I personally think the listeners would be more appreciative of that than if we tried to like everything's great. The meta's wonderful. This is
yeah.
how you play Blue Black Delver.
Yeah, and
You
for those
know,
of you who this is the first time listening, or you didn't catch last week's episode and you're jumping into this one, uh, basically it was a power rankings episode where Blue Black Delver had, I think, almost triple what the second highest deck is, and it was I think 34. It made 34 top eights, or no, 34. That was not the right thing. It made 34 top 32s in a 4-week month. So that's over 25%.
Blue Black Delver alone could have filled an entire bracket and still had a couple decks to spare for the other challenges. Like, we could have had an entire challenge that the top 32 was all Delver. That's how many Blue Black Delver decks put up finishes.
And we're not going to be talking so much about that today, but I did want to just address that. It is also kind of funny because this episode will be released after the ban announcement. So we don't know what's going to happen there. I think it's clear what we are hoping for, and because of what we talked about last week, but we will see. We will see.
I'm just really hoping I can dust off my Mole Drifters again. I love that card. I love that card so much. It was like one of the cards that got me excited about Pauper again. I think I've told this story, but I'm going to tell it again. I don't care. Sean has been playing Pauper for years, right? I've been playing Pauper for what, maybe 2? Something like that. But anyway, about 3-ish years ago, Sean was like, you need to play Pauper. It's commons. It's awesome. And at the time, maybe it was more than that, because this was Return to Ravnica era, I think. Yeah, so this was a long time ago. This was way long ago. More than 3 years. But I was just playing Nivik Cyclops, Boros Charm combo with Artful Dodge and Standard, and I was just one-shotting people. And Sean was like, there's a Nivik Cyclops Killing Fiend deck in Pauper. So I built that deck, and then I sat down to play Pauper with Sean and our other friend, who was playing like mono black edicts.
Yeah.
And I just like couldn't win a game, and I was just like, this format sucks. And then a couple years later, Sean was like, you need to pick up Pauper again. And I went and found a sweet blue black alchemy list, Mole Drifters, all the good stuff. And then from there I was hooked.
Yeah. So you were on the other side of the edicts the next time around.
Yeah, I guess I was, but I found a good edict deck that played with Mole Drifters and stuff, and yeah, so I'm excited to bust out Mole Drifters again if there is a Gush banning.
Yeah.
Or if not, I'll just keep playing with Gush and lament my life decisions. All right, well, let's jump into the card of the week then. Let's get this podcast on the road.
Card of the week.
I chose the card of the week this week. Excuse me, Brandon, I'm talking.
You're doing my job.
Card of the week.
No, stop. I'm the host. I'm hosting. Sean, tell us about the card of the week. You chose it, so why don't you tell us about it?
Oh, thank you, Brandon.
You're welcome.
Our card of the week this week is Moldavine Cloak. Moldavine Cloak is 2 and a green, so converted mana cost 3 for an enchantment aura. It enchants a creature, gives the creature a +3/+3, and it has the ability of Dredge 2. The reason I chose this is because I've seen that Stompy has switched from using Elephant Guide in a lot of the decks, and I did test a little bit with Stompy just to see how that changed it and see what the benefits to that were. And it felt really, really good, especially in the Blue-Black Delver matchup, because basically you're playing a bunch of guys that... Hopefully you're putting this on your Silhana Ledgewalker, which, if that is resolved, that is never leaving the battlefield in that matchup, unless they've got like a Shrivel postboard or something like that. But that's not going to affect your Moldavine Cloak.
Very few decks actually have edicts. like of the blue-black Delver variety of deck.
Right, and there's so many creatures in your deck in Stompy that even running an Edict is a bad idea, because it could just get like an Eldrazi spawn.
Yeah, and there's not enough removal in the blue-black decks to make Edicts good anyway, and that's why they're not there.
Right, and even if you do just throw this on a 2/2, that's a pretty respectable creature, and if you lose that creature or you get 2-for-1, you're just guaranteeing that you're going to be drawing a Moldervine each turn and dredging 2. Dredge 2 is so low that you can do that for a long time without decking yourself. That's never really going to happen.
Yeah, and can you even like say you get 2-for-1 with Moldervine? Like, because you're getting the Moldervine back. It is at like the cost of a draw step, I guess, but like, I don't know. It's just guaranteeing that your draw is always a relevant spell, and then it's like you're just 1-for-1ing them.
Yeah.
So like, you try to put this on a guy, they kill your guy. You trade your guy for their removal spell, and then next turn you're gonna draw your Moldervine Cloak again. So I mean, it's like sort of a 2-for-1, but like, I don't know, kind of not really. I don't know how to explain what I'm saying, but
yeah, I think it is a 2-for-1 still, but it's a 2-for-1 that doesn't feel so bad because you're guaranteed to keep things moving and happening. And just, it's the Elephant Guide, in my experience, never made a 3/3 elephant creature. If it did, like, that's really corner case and way less common than you wanting to just bring back Moldervine Cloak each turn. And I was finding that, okay, it's not safe right now. Okay, all of a sudden it's safe that my opponent has tapped out of red mana. I'm just going to throw this on my guy. Now it takes 2 lightning bolts or whatever kind of removal spell they have to try to deal with this. And then I have Eldrazi spawns and things that I can put this on again.
Yeah. I also really like this card in a format where Daze is as prevalent as it is right now. Like, this card's definitely much better against Daze than Elfin Guide is.
Why is that?
Because this comes back.
Okay, yeah.
And you can just play it on curve with no fear and just like, I'll get the Daze out of your hand, and then whereas with like Elephant Guide, you've got to like play around Daze, which means you got to have 4 mana up. At which point you're just much more prone to getting blown out by a removal spell.
Yeah, and you get to play a Stompy deck that you hit 3 mana, or you hit 2 mana, you have a Kyrian Ranger, and every turn you are guaranteed to draw an action spell in Moldervine Cloak until you're forced to draw a card off the top of your deck to find another creature to put this on. And that can seriously just run opponents out of removal or resources. And it's just +3/+3 is great.
Yeah, I mean, it turns all your guys into something big enough to trade with Gurmai Gangler. Not to mention just like eat anything else in combat.
Yeah, I was having a lot of luck putting it on Vault Scourge. Getting a 4/4 in the air with lifelink was pretty huge. And of course, we're still hoping it. I'm trying not to talk about it, but if you play against Snuff Out, Vault Scourge has basically hexproof from Snuff Out. It's a black creature, so now you have this thing in the air that the only thing that can stop it is a stack block from 2 of their creatures. Yeah, I think this card is great. I've even seen a couple of people playing it in Boggles, just as an extra. Like, it functions in all of the same ways, but in that deck, typically it's a little bit, like, clunkier because it's another 3 mana spell you're putting in your deck. But I don't hate it there, for sure.
Yeah, so another place where this card does, like, show up, I have seen it from time to time in Tortured Existence decks.
Oh, okay.
Just as, like, an extra way to, like, beef up your derpy little dudes.
It's just in the...
It's just in like it's in like the 1-of flex slot range that deck has, where it's just like, I don't know. I've seen a few people like fiddle around with Moldervine Cloaks.
I think this is a great card. Excited to sign this one, send it off. Any other ideas?
We could not sign it, send it off.
rejected. Main topic?
Main topic.
Main topic.
Okay, so like we said at the beginning of the episode, this is our Deck of the Month episode review where we talk about all of our scientific findings playing Black-White Pestilence.
And I'll admit my scientific findings weren't as scientific as they were last month with the testing with the other deck that I did that I can't remember. I just didn't...
Tron?
No, that was a long time ago.
Oh, is this our third time doing Deck of the Month?
Yeah, last time it was Boggles, I believe, for me.
Oh, right. Okay.
But I just didn't get as many games.
Yeah, we did it a couple months where you and I each did a deck, and then this was our first month each playing the same deck.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Wow, time flies when you're playing Pauper.
It's because you're having fun. So with this deck, I didn't get as many games in as I have with other decks. I really put a lot of my time into playing that mono white Pestilence deck. I keep calling that mono white Monarch deck, and I skimped on playing constructed leagues or competitive leagues, and I don't know. I just wasn't feeling great about competitive leagues this month and time constraints. So I did play some. I think I played about 15 games, so 3 leagues, and then some casual games, and then I watched a lot of this deck. What was your experience?
So for me, I was kind of in the same boat. I didn't do very many. I think I started one competitive league. I played like 3 matches in it. Queues took forever, and then I just played friendly leagues. But I don't know. I don't know. I just like playing the friendly leagues more than I like playing the competitive leagues at this point. But yeah, other than that, I've read a lot. I did a lot of study outside on the deck, so I like read a few primers, learned about a lot of like the different variants that this deck has, which like I kind of just like knew the deck list that you see, like the typical stock deck list that's, you know, makes top 8s or whatever in challenges every once in a while. I didn't realize that there were so many actual ways you can build this deck, which is something we're going to get into a little later. We're going to talk about all the different variations that this deck has. But first, let's just kind of talk about the deck itself, and just like, what's this deck's game plan?
It functions like a control deck. I think at least in the version I was playing, the castigates are really important to that plan of you're, of course, playing your kill spells in something like Deadweight or Disfigures, and then you're also playing...
Which figures?
Disfigures. As well as Edicts, and you have your castigates and to rip things out of their hand, and then you've got these cheap removal spells to deal with things once they hit the board, as well as Journey to Nowheres. So there's lots of removal, hand disruption, and then you have some sweet card advantage cards, like Night's Whispers or Read the Bones, depending on the version you play. And the namesake of the deck is you've got Pestilence, and it's just kind of this combo where you play Pestilence and Guardian of the Guild Pact, so your Pestilence never leaves the battlefield, and you can do a bunch of damage to your opponent with Pestilence, wipe their board, and then you've got this creature that's just going to beat in or block on the ground. All of this removal, all of the creatures that are great blockers, help you play Monarch cards. I think most decks are only playing, I think, 2 Palace Sentinels. So it's not like the most important thing to this deck, since it has so many other ways like Pestilence and Chainer's Edicts and these draw spells, as well as the core Skyfishers. I don't think I've mentioned those yet. I'll get into the creatures in just a bit. But a bunch of different ways to get card advantage besides the Monarch. And I think that's really important because in a lot of the faster matchups, you do want to take the Monarch cards out of your deck, which I think is a cool thing to have both options. But as far as creatures go, a lot of them play the, I don't know how to say it, the Aration Cleric. I don't have it up in front of me, but...
Aration Cleric?
Arishin?
Arishin? That's how I've always pronounced it, like Arishin.
Okay.
Arashin cleric.
It's not a real word.
Arashin. Arashin. That's how we'll pronounce it. Arashin. Arashin.
A
A Russian
Russian
cleric. A
a
Russian
Russian
cleric.
So it's got those guys that are a 1/3 that gains 3 life when it enters the battlefield, and then Core Skyfishers to do some pretty neat stuff. The Core Skyfishers are funny. Some decks do the Mortuary Mire loop, where they play Mortuary Mire, put a creature from their graveyard on top of their deck, use that to bounce it, replay it, get their guy back, and they're not really working through their deck, and they're not going to deck themselves or anything. And
Don't you have to sacrifice Mortuary Mire?
no, it's when it enters the battlefield. You put
Oh, that's the enter the battlefield one.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, I'm there.
yeah, and then of course they work well with your Bajuka Bogs, your cycle lands. You do have White Muldrifter, 3-bit Inspector that it can also bounce. So bunch of creatures, all of the toughness on them is more than average, so that if you can just do Pestilence for 1 and keep a creature around, that's fantastic. And all that comes together of like you're gaining all of this life. It almost seems like there's very little cost to gaining all that life in all of your tap lands. Gain you life. You may have Radiant Fountains. You may just have Kabira Crossroads. A lot of them have Pristine Talisman to continue gaining you life every turn. So you're usually, if they haven't hit you, you're over 30 life. And then you can Pestilence for really as much as you want. I mean, that's kind of the average deck of just that creature package and all of those spells. Is there anything I'm missing, Brandon?
I don't think so. That was pretty in depth. So thanks for listening, everybody.
I guess okay. One last thing while we're going through the deck here. All of the lands, not all of the lands, many of the lands do enter tapped, and you're playing Orzhov Basilicas. I think Scoured Barrens is the name of the land, and then some
Kabira Crossroads, Mortuary Mires,
and the cycling lands.
The cycling lands.
I think that was one of the biggest. It's very necessary because you need so many black symbols, and then early on you're going to need those white symbols to play your creatures, that you have to play tap lands. But it is more of an awkward mana base that people can go under your deck, and I think that was one of the biggest weaknesses that I found.
Yeah, this deck, like, you know what? Why don't we just kind of get into that at this point then? Just its position in the metagame.
Okay.
And let's talk about, because I think you covered the deck's game plan pretty well, what it's trying to do. So let's just talk about matchups. And yeah, we can just start with the aggressive matchups. They can just go under you because you're spending so much time on your tap lands, that it's usually not till turn 4 where you're able to double spell, because it's like, tap land on 1, and then maybe you have a Deadweight or Disfigure on turn 2 with another tap land, at which point you're probably untapping, casting a 2-drop spell, playing another tap land. And so it's really easy for the aggressive decks that can just like go wide really quick, or like the burn decks, for instance, that can just clock you enough. I think the burn decks in particular are bad because you can gain all that life, but it's slow and it's in small increments, and it takes you so long to kill that the burn deck can kind of just like, okay, I need to deal you 27 damage this game. All right. As long as you don't like get the pristine talismans going, they should be able to just get there with their tough decks.
So I do have stats in my burn. That's something I've tested a lot, but I'm on the burn side. I think between playing Pestilence or playing Black-White Pestilence and playing Burn, I've tested the matchup I think like 12 times, and I'm sitting around a 65 to 70% win rate with Burn. It's just that
doesn't surprise me. That sounds...
Yeah. Oration Clerics aren't even that big of a deal. Like, yeah, they're cheap. the only time I ever lost games is when they had an Oration Cleric that lived, and then they bounced it with Core Skyfisher more than once. And that can happen, but most of the time it was...
The other part of that puzzle is that they're attacking you with Core Skyfishers. You know, if they're just gaining life but not pressuring you at all, like the burn deck is going to draw burn spells. Like, and you're going to get there eventually. Like, you've got more burn spells than they have random life gain. So they do need to find a way to pressure you and kind of race your top decks, I guess.
Yeah, and playing on the side of burn, Molten Rain destroys this deck. Like, your lands are so slow that if you Molten Rain, blow up a land and do two damage.
Gosh. Can you imagine being on the play and their turn 2 is just like Orzhov Basilica, and then you just like play your third land, Molten Rain them down to probably no permanence?
I mean, I've done it, and
it's dirty.
Yeah, it's like they play that land and you're just like, oh man, you know that they have nothing else, that there's like that was their only land they could have played, because otherwise they just don't do that. I mean, unless they're just unaware that can happen to them, because that's just an auto win. But yeah, burn is a bad matchup for this deck despite all of its life gain. And then
what about like the other aggro decks like Stompy? How did you get a chance to play against Stompy at all, or?
I was actually on the side of Stompy, like I said when I tested this, but my feeling was that it is very hard for Stompy. Stompy it's not super, super, super fast. Like, it is fast, but there's enough time for you to put creatures that block, and they're more susceptible to having that hurt them really bad. Like a Core Skyfisher is pretty hard. An Oration Cleric is pretty hard. Really, that Core Skyfisher hurts a lot. And then the Castigates don't hurt as much, but they are ripping really powerful spells out of your hand that, like Moldervine Cloak and Castigate Exiles. So I do like being on the side of Black-White Pestilence. This deck is pretty much really good at killing creatures. And so, yeah, they can go under you, but I don't want to say that's the average. That's actually a good matchup.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to do any of the testing from the Stompy side, so I'm glad that you were able to pick up a bit of data on that. Let's talk about like Delver decks.
Okay.
So Blue Delver, I think we talked about this last week, right? Where Black-White Pestilence actually had really good numbers in the last power rankings. And we talked about that we felt this deck had a pretty good match, or a pretty good win percentage against the field, and was just a little bit under 50% against Black-Blue Delver.
Yeah, it seems like it's between 45 and 50% win rate against that deck. And the long game, I don't know, it doesn't really feel like the long game favors any one person more than the other. But the quick game, there's always the possibility that they can just get under your deck. I mean, if the long game does favor someone, I would say it is the Monarch deck, but I think that's a matchup where your Monarch cards come out, and they are some of your most powerful cards, so that's a downgrade for your deck. Your Pestilences aren't so good, since you're going to have to deal yourself 5 damage to deal with their Anglers or their Stormbound Geists. They are playing Stormbound Geists, and you're an Edict deck, so that is very difficult. But you have tools like Castigate. Castigate's going to be super important in clearing a path for spells you want to resolve.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. Castigate's been really impressive to me. That card's just really good.
Yeah, it's one of the best cards in the deck.
Yeah, and at first I was a little leery of it because, 2 mana hand disruption spell, but the format is slow enough that against the decks where it matters, it's gonna get anything you need, and exiling is huge game too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's honestly what makes this card so insane right now is the exile clause. You can just deal with so many things that would otherwise give this deck headaches. You just exile that card, it's gone forever.
And
You know,
if we're
all those silly flashback spells.
while
And
we're
not to
on,
mention it slows down Gurmag Angler.
that's true. Yeah. While we're on the subject of Castigate, I think one of the more important matchups that it works against is the Tron matchup.
Mm-hmm.
The Tron matchup is a bad one for this deck. Like,
Yeah.
they're the bigger control deck. Go ahead.
So if you guys were able to tune into the Twitch stream for the top 8 this past Tuesday, or if you want to go ahead in the future when Sean has it posted on YouTube, you'll actually be able to see a match where Sean and I both, we had Black-White Pestilence versus Tron, and Sean and I both said that, yeah, Tron's the favorite here. This is a tough matchup. It's favorite for the Tron. And that kind of held true. Like, we saw the Black-White deck. Maybe it wasn't this past Tuesday. Maybe it was a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was in the Swiss. I don't think a Tron deck made it to the top 8.
I think you're right. I think it was top 16.
Yeah, I think it was the Swiss rounds. But anyway, we saw Tron take down game 1, but then the Black-White deck just had this, like, turn 1, tap land, whatever, then turn 2, castigate you, turn 3, castigate you, and then I think that the Pestilence player also drew a Duress, and just like the castigate just was like, okay, there's the Ghostly Flicker, exile the Ghostly Flicker. You know, we just saw like the Black-White deck win that game on the back of castigate, whereas otherwise it didn't stand a chance.
Yeah, and we're like, this is going to be really hard for the white-black Pestilence deck, and kind of had to, like, we didn't eat our words, but we were like, wow, this is exactly what they needed to do, of just completely rip apart your opponent's hand and then follow it up with a little bit of a threat. It wasn't like a landslide victory. It was kind of like and it got there kind of thing. And then I think the game after that, it was just Capsize was an all-star, and they couldn't find a castigate or anything to deal with that.
That game was actually interesting because I feel like that game came down to the Capsize was great, but they still had those Guardians. She had like 2 Guardians, I feel like, chipping away, and they had like capsized all their other permanents. And it was just like, if that player can find their one of Din Rovahor, then this game is over. And so it was like a race to see if she could whittle them down with Guardians before they found the one of Din Rovahor. And then, as I remember, they found the Din Rovahor, and that was just it.
Yeah, but that the win, its ability to win and close out a game against the deck that's just gonna keep going and making this harder and worse for you, it's just not fast enough. So that is a really tough matchup. I'm gonna say the majority of the time, Tron player's gonna win.
Yeah, I think that Tron is its worst matchup, and like we said, the Blue-Black Delver isn't positive, but it's close to 50-50. It's not unlosable. Castigate's, again, really powerful in that matchup as well. But other than that, we feel like this deck has really good positive win rates against the rest of the field. Oh, I guess at Burn. Burn is the other one that's not great, but Burn's not been doing well lately either, so...
It is a mainstay in the top 8 decks in the format.
Yeah.
But
it's not as popular as it was a couple months ago.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe that'll change with how well Black-White's been doing. Maybe Burn will just be good next month again because people are playing a ton of Black-White.
Right. Yeah. I could probably do half this episode on Burn, but I'm not gonna. But so next I want to talk about, well, of course Boggles is a good matchup.
I think we can lump Blitz into that category too, of just sort of like all-in kind of creature aggro combo kind of deck. They just are soft to edicts.
Yeah, any deck that an edict is good against, they're gonna have a bad time. the opponent is going to have a bad time. As the Black White Pestilence player, you're going to have a great time. So I even think Tribe, well, new Tribe, I'm not entirely sure on. I don't have any data on that, but old Tribe, where it was just a bunch of Augur of Bolas and Tireless Tribe, that was a slam dunk, in my opinion.
I would imagine that the matchup is still difficult for Tribe to win, just because the creatures are all fairly not resilient. What's a good word for that?
Fragile.
Fragile. Thank you. That's the exact word I was trying to remember. But yeah, their creatures are all pretty fragile. It's not difficult to deal with Tireless Tribe. You've got tons of pinpoint removal.
Things like your dead weights and your disfigures and stuff like that are going to be really good. And then if you can resolve a Pestilence against that deck, it is pretty much over, in my experience.
Yeah, and like the other thing too is if you can keep their board pretty clear, which isn't super hard to do, there's not a lot of threats. It is threat light. These decks have taken out their circular logics for the most part. Like maybe you'll see one, maybe two, but for the most part, it's safe to assume that you'll see a Tribe deck and it won't be playing circular logic. They're just all on Dispels right now because of how great that card is in the meta. Mm-hmm. And so your Chainer's Edicts are just insane because they just don't have a counterspell for it anymore.
And Journey to Nowhere. Yeah, a lot of your removal spells are just fit in this little spot that is kind of a blind spot for a lot of the meta.
Yeah, so I think it's still favorable. I think that like the matchups improved slightly with the inclusion of Tethmos for the Tribe deck, but this is one of those matchups where the Tribe player, I would be, crossing my fingers. Like things need to play out just right here. Like I need to go turn 1 plains into turn 2 island, kill you, kind of a scenario.
Do you want to move on to Elves?
Yeah. This is another matchup that I think is very, very close, but I think is slightly favored for the Black-White deck. Typically, one of the things that makes Elves so good against removal decks is Lead the Stampede. So against the Monarch decks have so much removal that it's not hard for a Monarch deck to keep your board clear of relevant Elves. But then they can never beat your first Lead the Stampede or the second, it's just done. But this deck can fall onto the back of Pestilence to try to keep up with card advantage. And so it's not hard to just use your pinpoint removal to keep the rest of the creatures clear. And then if they do resolve a Lead the Stampede, it's always nice to kind of hold a Pestilence in the chamber so that you can kind of follow up, meet that Lead the Stampede, and still be on a card for card basis with that. This is another instance where Castigate is super important too for that very same reason. It can get those important payoff Elves out of their hand, but also it can just rip away Lead the Stampede and Distant Melody.
Yeah.
So I think this one's super close still. Elves is just one of those decks again that it's consistent and it's fast and it's good at what it's doing. And, if your draw just doesn't line up right, they can just, do the elf thing. And on turn 4, they've drawn 40 cards from their deck and their board is just huge. And they've got 10 10s and
yeah,
sorts of nonsense going on. That can just happen. That's just the nature of that deck. But
of course,
for the most part, I think that this is a favorable matchup for Black-White.
Right, and that's no different, I think, than any other deck in the format, really. A really good Elves draw will beat, most everybody.
Maybe not Blue-Black Delver.
But the games where they stumble at all and you can have time to play your tap lands, maybe rip apart their hand, those are gonna, their ability to catch back up isn't there as much. It's weird because Elves is typically one of the matchups that we say that Edicts are not good, but they still are not useless. So I don't hate Edicts against Elves.
Yeah, I don't mind them either, especially Chainer's Edict. Again, this is just a way to try to help keep that card parity as close to even as possible. Just anything helps. All right.
I
Are
guess
there-
I mean, maybe you were skipping this on purpose because we're not sure about it. But as far as Mono Blue Delver and Scred Delver go, I don't think we're confident in saying either way on those.
Yeah, I mean,
They're typically decks that they don't care so much about edicts.
this deck, I think it's worse against Mono Blue than it is against Scred. And again, I don't really want to say which one's the favorite or not. But I like Mono Blue having Daze is a big problem for this deck. Mono Blue being able to, like Daze is just so hard for this deck to play against because our lands come into play so slowly. It's just hard to find a window to play around Daze and still resolve your key spells to keep up with what Delver's doing. And so I think that Mono Blue is slightly favorable here, possibly. I definitely think it's more favorable than Scred Delver is, just because Scred Delver lacks the Dazes.
They're relying more, like Scred Delver is the better removal deck, but Black-White Pestilence does not care about you removing its creatures. You'd rather have the bounce spells to return your own creatures to your hand to save them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing Mono Blue can do. Put back a Spellstutter Sprite into my hand for later or whatever.
And then I guess I'm just going to go through this list to make sure we didn't miss anything. I think Boros Bully is a good matchup. I think that the deck is more aggressive, but that makes Black-White Pestilence the better deck because it's good at stopping creatures from doing their thing. And then I think we get down into just 2-point decks. Like, I don't really think it's worth talking about Affinity or anything like that. So do you want to move on?
Yeah, I just want to make one note on the Boros matchups and like the Bully matchups since we're talking about that. And you just need to be aware of prismatic strands when you're using Pestilence because they can stop you. So you can't just I don't know. You've got to be able to beat it.
Prismatic Strands isn't. I want to say it's not a good card against Pestilence.
No, but it is a tool that if you're not thinking about it, and it's just I've got 3 black mana available, and they've got 3 toughness creatures, and you're just black mana, black mana, black mana. They can prismatic strands you there and save their creature. So you've got to kind of make sure that you're in a spot where you're okay, if they have the prismatic strands, I can still respond to it.
Yeah.
And have enough damage there to finish the creatures off.
Yeah.
It is a way that if you're not thinking about it, they can save their creature, and it can actually be really bad for you there. But that was it. I think that we can now move on, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the deck variations. There's all kinds of lists. I think I struggled to find any identical lists.
Yeah, that's why we didn't want to do a set deck list. We kind of just went over what the deck does and kind of what an average deck has in it, because this is one of the decks that I think people put whatever they want in it to suit their own play style. I don't play Prismatic Strands because I just struggle with, I'm just looking to find value with this Prismatic Strands. Okay, they're burning my creature. Wait, I'm a deck that doesn't care about losing my creatures, so I just took that out of the deck. Do you want to, since you were the one that did more research on the different kinds of Black-White Pestilence decks there are, do you want to introduce our first variant?
Yeah. So I think this is the one we've been talking the most about. It's the one that I played the most of, and I think it's probably the one Sean played the most of. But this is sort of the more mid-range version of the deck. It's full of creatures. You've got the... it's got Core Skyfishers. There's
Arishan Clerics.
Arishan Clerics. You've got some decks play that creature with Vanishing, the flyer with Vanishing.
Oh yeah,
I can't remember its name all of a sudden. But yeah, this deck's just jam packed with weird creatures. Thraben Inspectors, Arishan Clerics, core Skyfishers. I've seen decks that like play a split of Arishan Clerics and Lone Missionaries. Guardian of the Guild Pact and Palace Sentinels are the most important creatures in the deck, I think. They're the creatures that you'll find like in every deck list. And then another one that sees quite a bit of play is Custody Squire. And then, that deck list obviously is just playing much less removal spells. They're not playing as many like divination effects, etc. Because, they've got so many creatures. But
yeah, I didn't test the card in this deck, but Custody Squire's position in the meta, it's tough to cast a spell that costs 5. Like, for the same reason you can't cast Muldrifters very often right now is the same reason you can't cast that spell. And it does have the downside of if you don't have cards in your graveyard, it's not going to do anything besides to be a 3/3 in the air that is like, yeah, that's good. That's going to be a creature that it poses a problem for other like Boros Monarch decks, the Mirror, those kinds of things, but very boltable.
Yeah, and like, I don't know, you're not too worried about this getting bolted. Like, in those kind of matchups, that's exactly what you want, is for your 3/3 to eat a removal spell after it already got you value, getting back one of your other more important creatures. But I agree still, though, like, it's really hard. Again, I'm going to fall back onto Daze. Daze is such a prevalent removal spell right now. The blue-black decks are cutting out, like, actual physical counterspell because Daze is just enough. The mono-blue Delver decks play Daze. I don't agree that Skred Delver decks should be playing Daze, but I've seen it. It happens. It's just so hard to resolve a 5-cost spell in this deck and have it be, like, relevant and still play around Daze.
Yeah.
So the next sort of variation is the more controlling version of this deck, which most of these decks are just down to like 5-6 creatures. So there's 3 to 4 Guardian of the Guild Pacts, and then generally just 2 Palace Sentinels. So this deck is the more controlling version of the deck. A lot more removal spells in the main deck. They're usually playing a split of Night's Whisper, Read the Bones. So you'll see like 2 Read the Bones, 4 Night's Whispers, So there's a lot more divination effects. There's a lot more removal. And they're just really, these are the decks too that are playing generally you will see them playing Prismatic
Strands, Pristine Talisman.
Pristine Talisman. Prismatic. I almost called it Prismatic Talisman, but I guess if I would have said that, I would have just given it away right away what I was talking about. But anyway, yeah, if you see Pristine Talisman, you can probably assume that they're on like the 5 to 6 creature package. I don't know. Someone could be a mad person and jamming Prismatic Strands in their core Skyfisher deck, but that's generally not what you'll see. So that's kind of one way to know what they're on is if you see
Pristine Talisman.
Pristine Talisman. I'm going to call it Prismatic Talisman for the rest of my life now. If you see Pristine Talisman early, it's a very safe bet that they don't have creatures that you can remove.
Yeah, because they're using that instead of like the Oration Cleric.
Yeah, they're using Guardian of the Guild Pact, which your removal spell likely can't kill, and then they've got a couple Palace Sentinels that you sort of just don't really care about killing for the most part. But anyway, I guess that's like relevant if you have Brainstorm in your deck. You can make better Brainstorm decisions. But so yeah, those are sort of the two main variations. Like there's the mid-range version, there's this control version. But then even within that, there's so many cards that you can play. Mm-hmm. So many different cards, like even down to the mana bases. So like I'm looking at a version that, doesn't have the Mire. Is that what it was?
Mortuary Mire?
Mortuary Mire. It's got Bajuka Bogs, Kabir Crossroads, but then you'll also find deck lists that have taken the cycling lands out of the deck and are playing a Mortuary Mire, and you see the versions of the deck that have like a Radiant Fountain or 2. I don't know. What do you think about Radiant Fountain specifically?
I don't like it personally. I don't put Radiant Fountain in a lot of my decks because I get punished so often for playing it because I need that colored mana.
Right. It's weird because I think that it's slightly better than Kabira Crossroads.
Yeah.
Because this isn't like true, but it is true. I don't know. Like the difference between white and colorless in this deck is sort of negligible. Like you're usually not like constrained for that white mana. Like, oh, if this Radiant Fountain was a Kabira Crossroads, I'd be set here. Like that's not really a thing. So like the difference there, I feel like is kind of marginal.
But between that and the planes, I would usually rather have the planes so I can play my guy on turn 2 or something like that.
Oh, sure, yeah. But if you're in the business for a life gain spell, I kind of like the Radiant Fountain over Kabira Crossroads because it comes into play untapped. And the difference there between colorless and planes, I just didn't feel like was that big of a deal. Like very rarely was I ever color screwed for white. It's always like, how can I get more black mana?
Yes.
And I found that having a land that gained me life and came into play untapped was important. So I kind of liked it a little more than Kabira Crossroads.
Yeah, and I know some people go crazy with them and they're like on a full 4 and stuff like that.
I'm on like 2 tops.
Yeah, and I'm like thinking about like, is the 1 worth it?
Yeah.
It's really good because you have the bounce lands, you have your core Skyfishers. If you need it, you can do that. But I'm usually like, I'm going for the tempo. I will give up my life total, make it up in some other way. Like, especially if you're on, like, this is, I think, kind of like a paradox of like, if you put Pristine Talisman then in your deck, does Radiant Fountain get better?
I think Radiant Fountain is more important. So, like, I was actually going to say when you finished your thought, but I'm just going to sneak it in right now. The core Skyfisher version of the deck, I think you should play Kabira Crossroads because white mana early is more relevant. The Pristine Talisman version of the deck, I think that it's better playing Radiant Fountain so that you just have an extra land that will come into play untapped, so that you can set up turns where you can double spell or just be able to play that removal spell on time. Not to mention, it also facilitates turn 3 Pristine Talisman.
Yeah.
Better.
But then you have, say, if you're on... I mean, the decks that I've seen that run lots of Radiant Fountains are also on lots of Pristine Talismans. So they'll have something like 3 Pristine Talismans and maybe up to 4 Radiant Fountains.
Yeah, and that's too much. Yeah,
it definitely is, and they're just trying to gain life and I think be too cute. And I would just rather be like, okay, I'm going to gain like a medium amount of life, but I'm so punished because my lands are entering tapped that I don't want to lose that tempo. I think I can make that up in being able to block or something like that. But that's why everybody has their own version. That's how I play the game.
Yeah, and I actually think that I found that I liked the controlling version of this deck better. I liked just having the more removal spells. I like Pristine Talisman. I'm sort of like a Timmy at heart. I love random life gain. Like if Kitchen Finks is one of my favorite creatures of all time. I just love cards that say like gain random life for no reason. Solemn Simulacrum is like in every commander deck I build. Wait, that card doesn't gain life. What card am I thinking of?
I have no idea.
Solemn is draw a card, tutor basics.
Yeah.
What card am I thinking of? I don't know. Anyway, I like random life gain. So I like the Pristine Talisman version of this deck. And in that version of the deck, I do believe that having Radiant Fountain is more important. You're less constrained on white mana because you don't have all those early white creatures that you want to cast. So the difference between Kabira Crossroads and Radiant Fountain is marginal. Radiant Fountain just comes into play tap, which means I can play on curve a little bit more % of the time.
Yeah, I like having more creatures and being a little bit more aggressive. I think up to this point, neither of us could remember the name of this card, so we didn't mention it, but it's even Rift Watcher.
That's the one! Yeah, Rift Watcher. The Vanishing one.
Yeah, it's 2 and a white for the 2/3. I've got it pulled up. Bird Rebel Soldier. It has flying and vanishing 3. When it comes into play or leaves play, gain 2 life. That card, like I said, if you run, I think, a little bit of extra planes, put Aven Riftwatcher in your deck, if it hits the battlefield, at some point that's going to be gaining you 4 life total. If you can bounce it with...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Core Skyfisher combos nicely with this card because this plus Core Skyfisher turns into 8 life.
Yeah, and like I think a lot of the time this buys you the time, and the vanishing does matter in some matchups, but most of the time that it buys you, you don't even really notice that it's going to go away.
Yeah, that's the big thing about this creature. As at first I was like skeptical about it because I was just like vanishing, like okay, but that's what it's there for. It's for the time. It gains you 4 life just on its face, but then it's a 2/3 flyer.
Yeah,
you know? Like you're more than happy to throw this in front of an insectile aberration. This guy blocks. This guy jumps in front of like anything out of the Stompy deck that doesn't have an enchantment on it. It's just such a good way to just clog up the board and just give you tons of setup time so that your Pestilences can just be like, I don't know, really potent. Just like you can just set up powerful Pestilence turns. Yeah, I like this card a lot. And it gains life. Did I say I like that?
Yes.
Life gain's fun. I'm building a life gain EDH deck right now.
Ew.
I mean, not right this second, but...
Oh, gross. Stop it. That's not
it's
Pauper. That's not Pauper.
Oh.
Did we talk about this last one? I don't remember.
No, we haven't yet. If it's what I think I'm thinking of.
Do it.
So this is actually something that I came across on Reddit, reading primers and stuff about the deck. I haven't had a chance to play test it, but it's the Kami of False Hope and Grim Harvest lock. So Kami of False Hope is a single white mana for a 1/1 spirit. It's a creature, and it says sacrifice Kami of False Hope, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So it's a white fog sorcery speed, kind of, because it's a creature, but you can sacrifice.
White Spore Frog.
Yeah, it's a white Spore Frog. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, it's a white Spore Frog. Now the card Grim Harvest. This card is 1 and a black, and it returns a creature that died this turn to play. I'm just going to read it. 1 and a black instant, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. But then it has this weird mechanic called Recover that no one knows about, which is 2 and a black, and its Recover cost is 2 and a black. It says, when a creature is put into your graveyard from play, you may pay 2 black. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Otherwise, remove this card from the game. So when this card's in the graveyard, you sacrifice your Kami. Your Kami dies, prevents all combat damage, does that thing. But then Grim Harvest's recovery thing triggers, and you can pay 2 black to put Grim Harvest back in your hand. Then you can cast Grim Harvest to put Kami back into your hand. And then just, recast your Kami.
So for the low cost of 6 mana, you can fog them every turn.
Yeah, that's more... Yeah, that's pretty good. It's pretty foggable, man. But it also doesn't have to be like every single turn. You can set this up slowly,
Yeah.
The one thing that I found with this is it's like at the end of the day, it's 6 mana. It's a lot of tempo and resources putting into this. But like presumably you're still making land drops. It's sort of buying you a lot of time to get to your big Pestilence turns and stuff and keep you alive. The thing though about Grim Harvest is it's really easy to interact with. If you don't have the 3 mana up and your opponent kills one of your creatures, your Grim Harvest is exiled.
Right, so if you're playing multiple, sometimes you bait them into that and they'll kill a creature that doesn't matter so much, and then you're like, oh no, that's gone, I have another one, ha! But a lot of the time, it's like this weird sub-game of like, okay, I'm going to play this now, does he have a removal spell? Okay, I don't know if he does. Let's just wait. And that it does become kind of complicated like that. And then my biggest problem with this version, and I think why the other version is better, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons, but this is a graveyard-based combo that lets your opponent set up a huge board state, and you're tapping out every turn to kind of keep it at bay. And then all of a sudden something goes wrong, like you get to your own end step, and your opponent bolts your Kami. Now you don't have Kami on their turn, and they attack you for a floppity jillion.
Yeah, it's not difficult to interact with this. Not to mention, Relic Progenitus is just like in every sideboard almost. There's a lot of reasons why this combo doesn't see play, but I thought it was really cool, and I had never heard of it before.
I've mostly seen it in videos. I've played against it in the tournament practice room, and I think that's kind of where it lives. Maybe in friendlies, but it is more of a casual, fun version that it looks really cool on paper.
Yeah. I mean, you can set up like instances where you have like multiple Kamis in play, so that like you can react to them trying to kill your creatures to exile your Grim Harvest, kind of a deal.
And it isn't all about the Kami. You're not just trying to lock them. Like, that's like your end game. But then in the meantime,
you're just getting back creatures that they've killed.
Yeah, like, okay, you killed my Core Skyfisher. Great, I have another Core Skyfisher. I'm going to get the value there. And now you're just down value. It has some really potent draws like that, but has those definite weaknesses, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I just thought it was I thought it was interesting enough that it's like worth mentioning that this is something that you can do with this deck. Right. But
yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, the way you should be playing this deck is like 5 creatures, a bucket of removal spells, as many Castigates as you can get, and pristine talismans.
Yeah. I think
Sean likes Core Skyfishers a little more than I do, but
I like I like both of those versions, but I think I'm on the creature version a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think we've talked this into the ground.
I'm done talking about it.
We have one more thing to do. Well, 2 more things to do. One of them is end times, and before that, we need to choose a new deck of the month. So, and we discussed this a little bit beforehand, but this is going to be like discussion on the air. I just want to do Blue-Black Delver.
Yeah, Sean's kind of just sick of losing.
I'm so sick of losing, man. Like, I just want to win, and I want to be able to play competitive leagues again. I've been staying away from competitive leagues because I'm like, this is the deck of the month, and I just don't feel good about it. I feel like I'm constantly at a disadvantage, and that's why I said near the start of this episode, it's gonna be weird because we're hoping that there's a banning.
Right. So if
there's not
gush deck, and then it's so like we choose a gush deck, and then in like 5 days there's going to be 4 days there's going to be a ban announcement. What are we going to do then?
So we have to choose 2, I think.
Okay. So we have to have we'll choose a gush deck. Blue-Black Delver, and then we need a deck in the chamber. I say Blue-Black Alchemy.
Okay.
The best Drifter deck.
So if I play Blue-Black Alchemy,
that's Tron. Would you not be playing Mulldrifters?
I would be.
Okay, well let's do Blue-Black Alchemy, and I'll play with Mulldrifters, and you play your version. And then
I'm trying to think of the card. 4 mana, counter target spell, put a bunch of cards into your library.
Oh. Yeah, from Guilds of Ravnica. That was like Devious Cover-Up.
Yeah, I might want to play Blue-Black Devious Cover-Up.
Okay, I'm into it.
If we do that.
I mean, they're close. They're similar.
I mean, I wouldn't be locked into that. That would be one of the versions I tested.
Sure, that's totally fine. Yeah, I'm probably just locked into playing Mulldrifters.
Well, maybe I'll play him too. I'm just gonna play all the cards.
Do whatever you want. You're a grown-ass man. All right, so let's do that. So Blue Black Delver is the deck we're going to play because we're sick of losing. And if gods be good, praying to the 7, there's a banning on Monday, and it's Gush. We're going to play some Blue Black Alchemy. I'm going to dust off the Mole Drifters. Back to my roots. I'm excited.
By the 9 Divines. Okay. Are we ready for end times?
Yes.
End times.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. This was Common Knowledge episode 68. One more to go. If you liked what you heard and want to support us directly, you can do so on Patreon. Patreon.com/common knowledge. Go there. Anyone can see the graph that Sean's been working on. Anybody can see that. But our patrons will get access to the Common Coliseum, which I had some free time. Finally, I had a day off. I was able to finally finish editing the episode of Common Coliseum. So that's gonna go up tonight. I'm gonna upload that tonight. And so patrons, you'll be able to see that. So I guess if you're listening to this episode now, you've probably already watched it because the future. But yeah, so you guys get access to the Common Coliseum. Not only that, but our patrons also have access to our Card of the Week card drawing. So we've been really excited about that. We signed all those cards just the other night. So I'm going to be mailing those out for our recipients. And we're still working to that stretch goal for the 5-card blind tournament. Curious about that? You can go to the Patreon page and see all the rules about it there. Big thank you to our sponsors, puremtgo.com and inkgaming.com. Don't forget to use that coupon code CCMTG10 when you're getting that checking out your cart full of all your sweet inked swag.
Goodies.
Yeah, do it. Use it. Get all your stuff, your goodies. Last way to support the show, and maybe one of the best ways, just go to YouTube, go to Constructive Criticism, and like and subscribe to all that great content that Spencer's putting out. There's all sorts of nonsense going on. I think there was an announcement, Limited Time Only is coming back with Danny Cathro as the host. You guys might know Danny Cathro, Grand Prix Top 8 competitor, beat Owen Turtenwald on camera. No, he didn't. I think he lost. He played a win-in for the top 8 of a Pro Tour against Owen Turtenwald, and I think he lost. I don't remember. Anyway, Danny's a great Magic player. He's great to listen to. That's coming back, limited time only. If you like to email us, you can do so at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to find us elsewhere, you can do that on Twitter at CK Podcast MTG or on Facebook. Just search for Common Knowledge. We've got an awesome group there on Facebook. You can find me at bclark_CK on Twitter. You can also find me on Facebook in that Facebook group, as well as Sean the Lobbert is there. And lastly, Sean, yeah, you can pimp yourself.
Okay. You can find me on Twitter at Lobbert8. That is LOBBERT and the number 8. And then you can also find me on YouTube, and there's finally another video up that I'm so excited about. It is the Mono White Monarch deck, and that deck is really good. I felt really good about that. It's got one bad matchup that is Blue Black Delver. We're crossing our fingers for that. But I'm really excited about that deck. Its ability to play the Monarch and stay the Monarch. It plays the Monarch more quickly than anybody else. I think you can stay the Monarch really easily. I think there's a lot of room for flex slots for people to put in prismatic strands that I completely disagree with, but people keep posting on the video saying I should put that in. So I would say go and check that out. I would be super excited. I just want views. I don't get any money for that. So have a good week.
Bye forever.